phase one, phase two, we drew our objects. We have not drawn our stick man yet, so you can leave that. We're going to move on to phase three of basic movements. So basically we're going to make our ball bounce, squish, and our clouds move. So if we go back to our file, we have everything ready to go, and basically we're working within here now. And we're going to use basically our free transform tool and our selection tool, but we can probably just stay on free transform most of the time. So here's our frames, remember, and the first thing it says is set keyframes for all layers at about 80. So I like to work sort of like a video camera. So this would be where I push record frame 1, and then I like to set keyframes at where I'm going to stop recording. So in this case 80. So you highlight them and then right click and go insert keyframe, and then you'll have the pathway from start of record to finish for just this segment. Now I'm going to show you at 90 here something that a mistake you might make. If you click on 90 or whatever frame you're working on and then you click again to try and drag, you're actually moving that keyframe. So you want to click away and then you want to click and drag at the same time. Don't click and then release and then click again, because then you're moving keyframes. It's different. Okay, so we have our keyframes set at 80, and then we're going to create classic tweens for the ball and cloud layers. So we go to our ball layer. You got to click between the two dots that you want to work with, right click in there, and then create classic tween. And then you're going to have a pathway there. And then we're going to do the same for the ball. So right click, create classic tween. So now we have those two pathways. And the next part says lock all non-moving layers. So our non-moving layers are the tree, the grass, and the sky. Okay, and then it says go to frame 80 for the clouds and move them. So clouds, frame 80, you click on the dot. I'm going to zoom out so you can see a little bit more here. And you can see your clouds are selected. Make sure you don't click. If you try and click here, you're not going to be able to select anything. Whatever layer you're selecting, you got to click on something you've actually drawn in the layer. And then we move them. So, and then we can preview and go back to the start, and it's saying the clouds start there and they end there. So we can push play, and there our clouds are drifting through the sky. Now, if you think, well, my clouds start in the middle, so I'm never going to see this cloud, well, you can also click on the first dot, and then you want to place it where you want it to start. So now they'll move a little bit faster, and you'll see all three clouds moving through. Okay, next part. So basically our clouds are done, so I'm going to lock our clouds. Now we're going to make the ball bounce 3 times. This is just a practice setting keyframes and moving an object through the frame, and then doing something, changing the shape of it to make it look a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to actually go to the first frame like I did for the clouds, and I'm going to place the ball maybe a little bit higher. And all it says each time is use 2 keyframes at the bottom, at the top of the bounce, so it looks like it kind of slows, and 3 keyframes at the bottom of the bounce to make it look like it squishes. So I basically, and then on the third bounce, just make it go off the screen. So I go, those 5 frames, I call them something each time, and you can just repeat it, because the bounce will be the same set of keyframes for all 3 bounces. So I go to about 10. The first keyframe, I go, okay, well, it's in the sky, so the first thing the ball's got to do, the first place that I want to move it, right click, insert keyframe. So at this keyframe, the ball is going to hit the ground. So I'm going to call that the first keyframe of each section ground. And then 2 over, right click, insert keyframe. Now I'm going to squish. So that's why we kept it on this free transform tool. So now I can squish the ball a little bit so it looks, but you gotta, when you squish it, it lines with the middle, so you gotta move it down a bit so it matches, like the ball hits the ground there. So you don't want it to squish and be up here. It's gotta sort of hit the ground and squish like that, squish down. And then 2 frames over, I just call this one unsquish. And you gotta move it up now so the bottoms line up. So now you have and it kind of bounces back a bit. Then I go a little bit over, right click, insert keyframe. On this one, I call this one sky. And then 2 or 3 over, I call this one float. So it floats up just a little bit more, because what's happening is it bounces up, but then gravity's taking over and then it's going to come back down. So if we look at how that looks, it goes boing, and then it kind of drifts. Now, the reason why it's going so slow is because we haven't told it. Keyframes are basically meant to tell your objects where to go. So we don't have it anywhere else to tell our ball where to go. So the next thing that we've told it to do is, remember, frame 80. So just to go to there. And that's fine. We can leave it like that for now. So then we just repeat this whole section of 5 here. So I go about 10 over, right click, insert keyframe. That keyframe is ground. 2 keyframes over, squish, move it down a bit. 2 keyframes over, unsquish, move it up a bit. A little bit over, insert keyframe. This one's sky. Go a little bit lower maybe, and then a few keyframes over. Whoops. I don't know what's going on. Insert keyframe. I'm gonna now. So remember I told you over here, if you click on a keyframe and then you click on it again, you're moving it. I don't want this one there. I'm gonna move it over just a little bit. So that's the time when you can use it, when you actually click on a keyframe and you can move it where you want it. And then I'm going to move this, I'm going to call this one float. Floats up a little bit. Okay, so now let's watch 2 bounces. So boing, boing, and then now the same thing, 80, that's the next thing that we've told it to do. So we have 1 more bounce. Now, this wouldn't happen scientifically, but on the 3rd bounce, since we're done with the ball, I want just the ball to just leave the frame. So we're going to do the 3 bounces this time. So insert keyframe, that one's ground, then squish, and I'm going to move this over. I don't know, something's wrong with my right click right now. And then I'm going to unsquish. So we have our last bounce right there. Make sure our bottoms all line up. So our last bounce, and then now, instead of frame 80 staying there now, I'm just going to have it bounce up. So we can watch the whole sequence now. Boing, 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 and it's gone. And that's it for this section. See you next time.